Hello and welcome to another episode of Around the Valley. This is the end of week 9. We say this almost every week. We say it all the time. It's exciting because it is. And we love doing this. We love bringing it. And we're going to roll right into this. Before I forget, as always, I'm Arsha Versarian, joined by Kenny Hodges and Kaylee Harden. And, let's get into it. Kenny, how you doing?
Man, as always, I'm incredible, man. Like I said, anytime we get to sit around and talk about what's going on in our backyard, especially on the football side of things, it's always a good night. So, without beating around the bush, we got some things we got to get into. So let's go ahead and jump right into the scores from week number 9. Starting in the West Valley, Granada, nice bounce back win. They went on the road and put a beat down on Chatsworth, 45-3. They ran all over the place and came away with a W. Birmingham, different week, same story. 52-0 win on the road at Taft, as they said on their Instagram. Anytime they get to go to Taft and put a whooping on them, it's always a good week. So they moved to 4-0 in the West Valley with that 52-0 win. And last but not least, one of the more exciting games of the week, as we told you guys, is be one you didn't want to miss. Elko and Cleveland had a knockdown, drag-out battle. A lot of drama, a lot of suspense all the way down to the wire. And Cleveland came away with a close 21-20 victory over El Camino to move into sole possession of second place in the West Valley. So let's go ahead and look at the West Valley standings. Birmingham at 4-0 in the league, essentially all but locked up the league title with the wins they've already accumulated with the teams that are behind them. Cleveland at 3-1 is in second place. Elko and Granada at 2-2 apiece in the league. Chatsworth is at 1-3, and Taft is at 0-4, 2-7 overall. So let's dive into what I think is a really intriguing storyline that is sort of developing in the West Valley when you look at what we know about the league. We know Birmingham is still the kings of the city. They've sort of run through this league, not to be unexpected at this point with what they do. Cleveland put up a valiant fight against Birmingham, but what we've seen out of them is they have established themselves as maybe they're not quite Birmingham, but they are going to be a team to sort of reckon with when they get into the postseason. They haven't really skipped a beat under Coach Guzman in that first year. So we know at this point we can confidently say they're the second place team in that league. Elko, after a tough start to the year, where we were wondering where the wins were going to come, they've sort of turned it around. They very easily could have won that game this past week, and we could be sitting there talking about them being at 3-1 and maybe talking about them as being the second best team in that league. But when you get to Granada, there's an interesting story to sort of talk about here with this team. As we've sort of talked about this year, as I've mentioned before, this is a team that has played one of the toughest schedules in all of the city section. We know they're playing 6 underclassmen, heavy minutes, heavy snaps. So it's sort of a team that's in rebuild, but there's still a lot of team. But as evidence of what they did this past week, there's a lot of talent still on this team. And when it's going right, it still looks like the Stanley boys are out there because they still running all over you when everything sort of goes right. But where they're sitting now, when you look at the rankings, when you look at where their record is sitting at 2-2, 3-6 overall, even with that tough schedule, it's kind of hard to sort of predict what is going to happen with this team come postseason. You can make an argument that they do deserve to still be in D1 because of the talent and the schedule. But record-wise, when you look at how they've come up short in some of these games, maybe you can make the argument that maybe they should be in D2. So I'll start with you, Kaylee. Good evening, by the way. Does Granada need to win this week in their regular season finale to avoid falling into D2? We know the standard that's set with Bucky in this program is they consider themselves one of the better teams in the city. They're one of the better programs in the city. That's what they've sort of built and cultivated. But record-wise, you could make the argument that this team should fall out of D1 and drop into D2. So do they need to win this week to avoid potentially falling into the D2 category where they really don't see themselves? What do you think?
I don't necessarily think that a loss this week would be indicative that they need to change back down to going D2, but it definitely strikes me as a little preemptive, maybe them going to D1. Again, they probably didn't know that they're about to lose the talent that they did, so that I'm sure that was a reason for the stark difference in performance from last year to this year. But because of their reputation, like you said, and because of the coaching staff that they have, I think that they can remain in D1 even regardless of their performance this weekend. I think it's still possible for them to remain in D1 and hope for a better D1 performance in their sophomore season than their debut season.
So I ask you, Arshavir, do you think that the respect of what this program is will have the committee keep them as a D1 playoff team, or is it really imperative for them to win this week, or else they're going to be looking at, I mean, truth be told, they'll probably still be a top seed in D2, but that's not what this program is. That's not what they've been. They consider themselves, even if they had to go on the road, that's what Bucky Brooks expects this program to be. But the question still remains, they've got Birmingham, which is a tough mountain to climb, but do they need a good showing in that game in order to convince the committee that this is a year that maybe they can still stay in D1 as opposed to getting dropped down?
Yeah, I 100% think they need to beat the computer ranking or the computer prediction to stay in D1. And it's not to say anything against them, but you kind of look at where they're around, right? You got Franklin near them, Crenshaw, Southeast. As far as strength of schedules, they have a stronger strength of schedule, which would keep them in the D1, bottom of that D1 bracket. But if they lose and El Camino wins against Cleveland, that changes that dynamic because they lost to El Camino. And that would probably bump them out of D1 and the top seed in D2, and El Camino would take their place. So I do think they really need a good showing so that the rankings don't really kill them, the computer rankings. And if they get that really good showing and Elko wins, then they both might sit at the bottom of that bracket. But that's what they need. They need to really show that they're better than the projections.
I think that the respect would be there because of that schedule, being the team that plays in the West Valley, scheduling tough in the non-league. I think the respect factor might keep them there. Like I said, Elko's remained in D1 last year, even though they had a really tough go of it because of how they scheduled. So conventional wisdom would tell you as long as they hang somewhere around that, the computer projections of what this final score should be, yeah, they'll probably hang around in D1. And I'll tell you what, and to be honest with you, if you're a handful of those teams that we expect to be sitting around the top of D1, like NoHo, like Kennedy, like some of these teams, you'd almost rather they go ahead and get blown out, let them drop down in D2, because what you really don't want to see in round one when you're hosting a playoff game is Bucky Brooks and his crew coming into your building with that damn veer in round one of the playoffs. You really don't want to see that. That's just because at a bare minimum, if you watch a Granada game, nobody comes out of those games 100% healthy because it is a car wreck the entire game. So you probably don't want to see them. You'd rather them go ahead and y'all go be top seed in D2 and run through that. Y'all stay out of that 15, 16 place. We don't need to see y'all. So we'll leave that conversation there. Still a lot of things in the West Valley we'll kind of get to and look ahead. But let's go ahead and move on to the Valley Mission. Starting with the scores from the games in the Valley Mission this past week, Canoga Park, congratulations to them. Lucius Mills, they get their first win of the year. They pick up their first win in the Valley Mission, a 44-14 victory over Reseda. Sylmar and Van Nuys, we asked the question last week about Van Nuys. Could they do it? Arshavir said we could ask him after the game. Kaylee said, no, she wasn't buying it. I had hope and optimism, but Sylmar said, no. You guys are on the way up, but you're not us yet, as they take them down 13-0 at home in their regular season finale. Kennedy goes on the road to Panorama. Like we said, it's usually a house of horrors for Kennedy. Not this year. They brought enough garlic and crosses, and they handled business. They took down Panorama 47-14 to move to 5-0. So looking at the Valley Mission standings, Kennedy, congratulations to them. They have all been locked up. The Valley Mission, it is a formality at this point. They'll do their celebrating next week after they wrap up the regular season. They're at 5-0, 7-2 overall. Sylmar is at second place. They finished their regular season at 6-4, 5-1 in the Valley Mission. Congratulations to them. They should be a tough team to deal with when come postseason. They'll get a chance to rest and take a week off before they get rolling in the playoffs. Van Nuys is in third place at 3-2 overall in the league, 6-3 overall. San Fernando is behind them at 2-3 in the league. Panorama is 2-3. Canoga Park at 1-4, and Reseda at 0-5. So here's a little fun question. I know it's going to feel like out of left field, but when I started looking at the Valley Mission, a lot of the conversation around the Valley Mission we've been having all year. We've talked about how good Kennedy is all year. We've talked about Sylmar being the team that they sort of proved to us. Like, maybe they weren't Kennedy, but this is a very good team that 5-1 in the league sort of proves it. Van Nuys is a team on the rise. They're not quite there yet, but when you look at the fact that that quarterback's coming back, they got some young talent on that team, they could be a team we're talking about being the top team or being a real challenger to Kennedy in the years to come, maybe not right now. San Fernando, same thing, working in some young players. It was a bit of an up and down year. Panorama, we know the story. What I want to focus on is this Canoga Park team. They're obviously a team because they've been in rebuild. We haven't talked a whole lot about this year, outside of mentioning that they are playing a ton of underclassmen who have taken their lumps this year and have hung tough. You know, you look at the scores of these games, they've been getting their butts handed to them, as you would expect when you're going up against some of these more experienced teams. But looking at what they did this past weekend against Reseda, you can see the flashes. You can see some of those young players starting to figure it out after weeks and weeks of getting kind of being the nail. They finally got a chance to be the hammer this week, and they sort of delivered. So looking at what they have in week 10, they're going to play Panorama to finish up the season. Yes, the computers are predicting that to be like a 4-touchdown victory for Panorama, sure. But games aren't played on computers, they're played on the field. And what we've seen from Panorama this year is we've also seen a team that's been a little bit up and down. They can be flat certain weeks. And this Canoga Park team is building, but they've got some young guys who play really hard. So the question I wanted to ask you guys, looking at Canoga Park, looking at the fact that if they are to beat Panorama, it gets them to 2 wins. Last year, if we're looking at precedent from last year, Grant got in with 2 wins. Monroe got into the playoffs with 2 wins. And a lot of that was just based on the fact that they were in tough leagues. So the question I have, and I'll start with you, Ashavir, this time. If this Canoga Park pulls off the unthinkable and goes, and these young guys go in and beat Panorama, should they be awarded a spot in
teams that they would have to leapfrog? They'd have to jump 10 spots to nab that number 16 in D3. There's some schools there that I don't think they leapfrog with a win. But also, if they beat Panorama, then the computers would place them above Panorama. And right now, Panorama is solidly in the middle of D3. So it's definitely something to look at, because there's still some D3 teams that have 2 wins. Heck, Diamond is 0-9, but based on the strength of schedule, if the playoffs started now, they'd probably be in the bottom of D3. So that's a lot of hemming and hawing to say if they win, yes, I think they get it. It'll be hard. They'll probably sneak in as a 15 or 16. But if they can pull it off, I think they get it.
Well, what say you, Kaylee? I know you haven't seen a ton of Canoga, but you've heard the stories. You know where they are. What do you think? If they can beat a Panorama team that is supposed to be better than they are, and they you get the 2 wins, knowing that that's sort of a benchmark. If you can get the 2 wins, but you play the tough schedule, they'll usually kind of throw you in the back end of D3 in the D3 playoffs. Do you think they deserve a spot if they can get to that second win by beating Panorama?
Do I think they deserve a spot? Potentially. I think the one thing Canoga has going good for them right now is they've been pretty consistent and in their rebuild and how much better they're getting. So even if they were to sneak into the bottom of D3 for the playoffs, I'm not really sure if the risk-benefit analysis there is really worth it for them. It's the postseason. People could get hurt. People could get injured. And we know that given what we've seen all season, how it's going to shake out for them. So why do that? I just don't think that it necessarily is. I don't think it's necessary for them this season. But if they did win, especially against Panorama, then sure. I mean, go to the playoffs. But like we've said, they have a young team. It's not like any seniors are missing out on a playoff run.
Yeah, that's true. Like I said, it's one of those things where it's like, for me, you know me. I come on here every week, and I'm always got some pie in the sky, just hopes and dreams and wishes for some of these schools.
I'm speaking like a Browns fan. I'm like, you know what? There's always next season.
Which is true. That's and I'm gonna be honest. As a Jets fan, I look at Canoga. They wear the same green. Yeah, it's kind of PTSD a little bit. Maybe that's why I'm hoping and wishing for them to have some good things. But for me, if they were to get in, they're obviously a team that I wouldn't expect them to be anything more than like one and done. But I do think that for the hardships they sort of kind of went through the last year, with everything sort of being in flux, new head coach, numbers dwindling in the program, where they've kind of sort of had to fold the JV into the varsity and the JV then sort of becoming the varsity. Like it's been a tough road. And a lot of these young guys are out there fighting and scratching and clawing. So if it were to happen for them, be cool. Just to be able to kind of maybe get that experience, get that taste in your mouth to kind of get you going into your off-season program, into your off-season training, feeling like, hey, what could be? Maybe we can take another step. I mean, that's maybe the hope there, but I'm not expecting it. But hey, it'd be a cool story. So, and like I said, realistically, that's all I have for the Valley Mission this week in terms of conversation pieces. Because like I said, the conversation has already begun and ended with Diego Montez and how he's been stepping on everybody this whole season in this league. So let's go peek at the bottom and see what's happening down there and see if there's something good underneath everything else that we've known. But we'll leave the Valley Mission conversation there. Again, congratulations to Kennedy as they wrapped up the league. But let's talk about a league that we thought might have been wrapped up a couple weeks ago. But there's a coach who's got a lot of rings in his pocket rattling around, who is sort of building his program back to a chance to maybe snatch another title. So let's start in the East Valley with the East Valley scores. Grant, I told you guys. I said it. I threw it in there. I had a little caveat. I had a feeling in my gut. And I told you, I was like, hey, pay attention to that Grant Arleta game. Styles make fights. And lo and behold, Grant goes on the road to Arleta, pulls out the 22-15 victory over the Mustangs. Over at Verdugo, Chavez and Verdugo went to battle. Verdugo came our way with the 23-6 win, putting themselves in position for a very big matchup this week. Fulton fought real hard, came real close, and almost got their first win in the East Valley. But Poly came away with a close 10-7 victory at home. Last but not least, NoHo goes on the road to Monroe. Monroe's homecoming. They didn't care. Put up a 56-0 shutout over Monroe. Maybe there's a few guys in that program that still has some PTSD from 2 years ago, so they went and made sure they told Monroe what they felt about what should have happened 2 years ago. Yeah. But looking at the East Valley standings, going into week 10, NoHo sitting in first place, 6-0, 9-0, still only undefeated team in the city section. We'll keep that in mind. Verdugo right behind them at 5-1, 7-2 overall. Big matchup between those two for the East Valley title. this week coming up. Arleta in third place, sitting at 4-2. We thought maybe if Arleta had won, we could have had an opportunity for some chaos, but no, it's just straight up ones. NoHo and Verdugo gonna run the fades to see who wins who wins the league title. Arleta kind of falls off there in third place, 4-2. Polly behind them at 3-3, 5-4 overall. Chavez and Grant also at 3-3, 4-4 overall for Chavez, 5-4 overall for Grant. Fulton at 0-6, 3-6 overall, and Monroe 0-6, 0-9. So let's get all the other stuff out of the way. Yeah. We know what everybody else is doing. The East Valley is all about this matchup coming up between NoHo and Verdugo. We talked a couple of weeks ago. We kind of saw where the train was coming down the track, where Verdugo had put themselves in position. They had handled business. They needed to win. We saw after week 7, we said, hey, week 8, week 9, there's a couple pitfalls in there. But if they can get there, we have a conversation point. Well, lo and behold, Coach Jackson got his boys ready. They handled business those 2 weeks. They get to 5-1 in the league, and now straight up they go to North Hollywood, and it's all on the line for all the marbles, winner take all for the East Valley. So the question here is simple. I'll start with you, Kaylee. We know what North Hollywood has been. They've been a bully. They've been beating up people all year. Their defense is stifling. They run the ball. They're physical. The quarterback can't, as soon as you start worrying about the run game, he can then start beating you with his arm. But Verdugo has proven they are very, very tough. They are amenable. They are adaptable. They're flexible. They can play whatever style game you want to play. So the question here is simple. In your opinion, what does Verdugo Hills need to do to be able to go into North Hollywood and do something nobody's done all year, which is beat this Huskies team? What do you think they need to do to get it done?
They need to get some cooler uniforms. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think they need to go in with the exact attitude that you were just describing, that they need to be the first people this year to hand it to North Hollywood if they want to win, because otherwise you're going into it with less of a sense of confidence that you need to beat this NoHo team. Like you said, they're tough and they've been unbeatable thus far, so you have to be better than everybody else who's played them thus far and bring home that win.
Same for you, Archivir. Now, looking at this Verdugo Hills team going to play North Hollywood, what realistically is the key to them coming away with this victory?
Kind of cliche that I say this, but it's their defense. No, it's their defense combined with their pick your poison offense. If you want to shut down the run with Aiden Mejia, you got to shut down the pass. And can you do both is a question. Now look, Verdugo Hills believes they should be 9-0. This is a team that believes they gave away the first game and believes they gave away the game against Arleta. So when you have a team full of belief that they are better than they've shown and they're starting to round into shape, that's a team you got to watch out for. But here's the thing. This North Hollywood defense has only given up 35 points all season. That's like 3.9. It's less than 3.9. It's less than 4 points a game. So they're barely giving up more than a field goal a game. And they've lived in the backfield of most of their opponents. So the team that I think ultimately comes out is the team whose D-line lives in the other team's backfield. Both teams have done that. Verdugo Hills has shut down a couple explosive type offenses with that kind of live in your backfield defense. And they just got to do it again. If they can live in that backfield, they will give zero time to Arlowskis as the QB, zero time to their multitude of running backs, led by anyways, their multitude of running backs. So that it is. Which team is going to live in the other one's backfield?
Yeah. I will throw in one of the things that I think is going to be if we are at this point next week talking about Verdugo going in there and pulling the upset, I think what the conversation we'll be having is Verdugo was able to get the splash plays to sort of put themselves in position to maybe finish drives. Because to me, when I look at this season, there are two games that come to mind. And they're the two teams outside of these two who I think have what we consider probably the other two best offenses in this league, which is Grant and Arleta. And both of those teams were able to move the ball a little bit on North Hollywood. But what makes this North Hollywood defense so great is from the 30 to the 30, you might be able to move the ball a little bit. When you even think about approaching that red zone, that's when everything sort of clamps down. This defense gets better the shorter the field gets. And they've been that way all season long. If you've only got 30 yards to play with, it's hard to find room to make plays on this team, on that defense, on that Huskies defense. So the key for Verdugo, and I'm assuming Coach Jackson is kind of, while he's been preparing for these other teams the last couple of weeks, is sort of probably, we know Jackson the way we know him. He's been plotting and scheming about how he's going to be able to find and get these playmakers into some space, because that's the thing about Aiden Mejia this year is whenever they've been able to get a little bit creative with how they get him the ball, whether it's in the backfield, whether it's lining up out wide, whether it's lining him up as a slot back, and maybe he's catching a end around or something, like making sure you get him the ball in places where maybe he can make a guy miss and then he can use that speed and burn you is going to be the key for them. They've got to find some splash plays. And if you get that ball in that 25-yard and in range, can you finish a drive or two? We know you're not going to score a bunch of points on this North Hollywood team. That's not going to happen. It's just not in the cards for anybody until they get to the postseason and they run into some other giant offenses when they're in that D1 playoff, right? But for Verdugo specifically this week is, can you devise a scheme that would allow you to maybe get inside that red zone and then maybe finish off a drive? If they win this game, to me, it's going to be something like a 13-10 game. If you can find the end zone once, maybe put up a couple field goals, and then rely on the defense to sort of shut them down, that's the formula. Thinking you're going to go in there and outscore them, that stuff's not going to happen. Now, with this team, as you've laid out, they're giving up 4 points a game. Which spells out if you get a field goal, you're lucky. That's the type of defense you're going up against. So it's going to be, can you get 2 or 3 of those drives to end in points, and you got a shot. That's all. That has to be the game plan for Verdugo this week. So find the splashes and then have your defense hold on.
Now, just to expound on that real quick, Mejia is the speed. He's their big game breaker. But like I said, it was pick your poison, because Jared Smith's got an arm, and if he's given a little bit of time, he can sling it around. So it's going to be interesting how North Hollywood's defense chooses to attack this two-headed offense. And honestly, like I said, if this Don's defense can make life really, really hard for those runners, you've got some issues. Now, the one more thing is, with that aggressive North Hollywood D, Verdugo likes their little screen passes and short to the back, out of the backfield. That would be key. If they can break a couple of those, it'll probably force North Hollywood to kind of take another look at how they're attacking them defensively, because their aggression might work against them.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be fun. Regardless, it's going to be fun. North Hollywood, I think, will find it a little bit tougher going against Verdugo than some of the other teams they face. But hey, listen, we'll be locked in for the battle for the East Valley title. So before we move on to the looking ahead to the action of Week 10, just to show, as we always do, show our teams in the southern section that are in our backyard a little bit of love. Let's run down the scores of the notable games that happened this past week. Starting out, Chatsworth Sierra Canyon, 45-0 win over Loyola. They moved to 4-0 in the Mission League, and they'll be on the road playing for the Mission League title against Sarah next week. If you remember the game from last year, it was a barn burn. I expect more of the same. Moving over at Chaminade. A big win for Chaminade. It's been a tough season for them. They snap a 3-game losing streak with a 31-30 victory over Notre Dame. Alemany drops their game at home against St. Pius. St. Matthias 34-14. They've lost 4 straight games after a 5-0 start. St. Genevieve and won a game that's going to go down in lore at that school. Young Mr. Jalen Burt, somebody we know very well from our time covering him at North Hollywood, has been an impact player all season for St. Genevieve. This Friday was no different. St. Genevieve locks up the Camino Real League title with a 35-28 win over St. Monica. Jalen Burt had a 60-yard kickoff return with under a minute to go to win that game after St. Monica came back from 2 scores down in the fourth quarter. Big win there for St. Genevieve. They lock up the league title and move to 7-1. Moving over to Burbank. Burbank with a 52-7 whitewashing of Crescenta Valley. Burbank moves to 5-1 in the Pacific League. Burroughs went on the road to Pasadena. Maybe a little bit unexpected, but you never know how it goes with some of these rivalry games. They lose to Pasadena 24-7. They dropped to 4-2 in the Pacific League, but they are still 6-3. Burbank 7-2. We got some juice for that rivalry game in week 10, y'all. But moving over to Calabasas, 43-34 win over Rio Mesa. They get their first victory in the Canal Coast League. They move to 5-4 overall. Viewpoint goes to River Islands, and they win 49-6. They move to 6-3. They match their win total from 2023 with the victory. Over at Crespi, 52-13 win over Cantwell Sacred Heart. They move to 5-4, 3-1 in the Del Rey League. Over Village, it's been an up and down year. This week was a little bit more of a down. They lose to Ontario Christian 27-13. But despite that, they're still in position with their record in the league. They go on the road to play Aquinas next week, and they can win the Iron Week title if they can get back to 5-5 with a win there. And last but not least, Valley Christian with a 35-18 win over Heritage Christian. Heritage falls to 0-4 in the Ironwood League. So still some good stuff to come there next week. So let's go ahead and look ahead to week 10. We've got some interesting matchups. Like I said, I mentioned Panoramas at Canoga Park. Socius. That Joe, I still show love to some 8-man action. We got 7-0 undefeated Sherman Oaks. Go on the road at East Valley, looking to go 8-0, wrap up their regular season. They'll be a title contender in 8-man. As Fulton moved out of 8-man, Socius is so we've asked who we're going to sort of step up on our end and become that next big giant. Socius has done that this year. They're 7-0, looking to go 8-0 at East Valley this week. Kennedy's wrapping up at Van Nuys. An intriguing matchup with Van Nuys. See if they can get to 7 wins on the year. Poly is at Grant. The way this season is going for those two teams, that who the heck knows what's going to happen in that game. It probably is going to be a fun one. Obviously, the big one, Verdugo at NoHo. Granada's on the road at Birmingham, and Burbank and Burroughs. The big Burbank rivalry takes place in week 10 as well. League title won't be on the line, but the bragging rights for the next year will be in that one. So I'll ask you, Kaylee, of all the action this Friday, what's the game outside of, you know what? Let's take Verdugo and NoHo out of it, because we know that's the big one. Everybody's going to be looking at that. No. We hold feet to the fire here. I'm not going to let you wiggle out of it like I let Arch Revere wiggle out of the whole Van Nuys conversation last week, talking about that BS, talking about, talk to me next week. No, that's not hot take. That's a bad hot take. You got to put your feet to the fire like Kaylee did. She was right. So outside of Verdugo, NoHo, looking at the schedule, what else do you think could be a fun matchup that if you had to direct people to, you would tell them, hey, go watch that game? What you got?
That's not a fair question, especially making me go first. And you took the words right out of my mouth, and you saw yourself doing it. Honestly, it would be really nice though. I would really like to see how Elko finishes, given all of the things that they've overcome this year, losing their players, so on and so forth. This is the train engine that just cannot be stopped. They don't let anything get them down. So, I would like to see. I just want them to end on a good note. That's all I want for them.
Hey, listen, like I said, it's an open-ended question. I'm like, we try to give the people some options. You know what I'm saying? All right, I should be saying for you. What else on that schedule are you looking at saying, man, I would tell people to go check that game out too. What you got? What are you looking at for week 10?
I was going to say El Camino and Chatsworth, but Haley threw that out there. So I'm gonna have to switch up the hot take. I'm gonna go Grant Pollock. Now, Grant seemed like they figured some things out with that big win against Arleta. But are they going to be Jekyll and Hyde? Is the Hyde going to come out this week against a Poly team that has played them tough in recent years, and Poly has really not been a pushover for anybody. So that's the one. If you're not going to be watching Verdugo NoHo and you're not going to be watching El Camino and Chatsworth, check out Grant Poly. Could be interesting.
Listen, all good options. So I'll throw a couple in there, right? If you've never been to an 8-man game, it's weird. It's exciting. So if you're in the East Valley, go watch that Sochas team. The bits and pieces I've seen of them this year, they're a fun bunch, and they could be on their way to an 8-man title, sort of continuing to pick up that mantle from Fulton and establishing themselves as the next big team that you got to take down on the 8-man scene. Kennedy Van Nuys is very interesting. It's an interesting one because if you think about it from Kennedy's perspective, what are they playing for? I don't know. Maybe Diego Montez plays a quarter and a half and we make sure we get him to the postseason ready. Maybe we see a lot of backups getting time that we normally don't get to see. Maybe Van Nuys takes advantage of that. Because listen, if Van Nuys can win that game, listen, computers ain't going to know. Okay, that Diego Montez only played the first half and then sat down. All it's going to say is that Van Nuys got to 7 wins by beating Kennedy, and that might be enough to get them a home game in the playoffs. I'm just saying. So who knows what could happen there? But also, I don't know. Kennedy, even in there with their backups, they still might win. Whatever. Poly Grant, obviously, like I told y'all last week, you don't know what the hell you're going to get from this Grant team. Regardless, it's going to be exciting, but they might be world beaters. They might get crushed by the world. Who knows? And the same thing with this Poly team. The roller coaster, it only makes sense that these two teams are sort of jostling and battling each other. And who knows? Whoever wins this might put themselves in position to be on the top end of the bracket of D2 when the playoffs begin. And the last one I'll sort of throw in there, that Burbank Burroughs. Listen, if you know, you know. If you're from those parts, you know what it means to that community. You know what it means to the alumni. You know what it means to get the bragging rights when these two teams kind of match up against each other. So, hey, listen, make it a fun night. Go out there. The bragging rights will be on the line there. And matter of fact, go watch all these games. We always tell you guys, if you're in the neighborhood and you want to support these kids, go watch them. Take your butts to Canoga Park and go watch that Canoga Park team try to get 2 wins when we didn't think they was going to sniff a damn win this year. Go watch some of these teams go out there and play. You know what I'm saying? So we're going to leave the conversation there. It has been an exciting season. We are still feeling like it felt like it went by in a blink, but it also feels like we still got a whole lot coming when you look at how good our teams have been across all 3 leagues in the city section this year. So for Harsh Revere Starin and Kaylee Harden, I'm your boy Kenny Hodges. Make sure you like, subscribe, leave comments. We see in the comments. Thank you, brother, whoever that was that gave me my flowers for my geniosity about that Grant game. I appreciate it. Make sure you leave those comments. We read them. We're going to read everything. And make sure you go to the valleysportstelegram.com. We have writers on the ground. We are writing about all of these teams. We putting out power lists. We got power rankings where I do the Valley Gyms every week to tell you where you need to go, where you need to be for all this action. We got so much stuff jam-packed on that website. If you want to know what's going on in the Valley, all you got to do is come to us. So for another episode of Around the Valley. We're going to see you next time. Peace.